Welcome to the Wooper Club League Season 10, Week 7 Power Rankings. Only one more week to go. I am IllLogic, coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant, and as always I am joined by Steve, coach of the Waterdeep Wobbuffets.
Hello.
And this was an odd-numbered week, and so you know what that means? Not much movement, because all four of the top teams ended up getting wins. We didn't actually get any movement, so the Noctowls remain undefeated at 7-0, the Wobbuffets at 2, Bouffalant at 3, and Ret 1 Burbs at 4. All get wins as well to stay at 5-2. That does mean we have some clinching scenarios we're going to be talking about later, but for now we will go over these four teams real briefly here. First up, Steve, we'd like you to talk about the Noctowls with a 5-0 victory.
Yeah. So the Newport Noctowls brought a team of Raichu Alola, Pincurchin, Thievul, Kangaskhan, Mudsdale, and Decidueye, and were able to pilot them to a 5-0 win against the Baltimore Oricorios. Overall, when watching this battle again, it was a very tame battle. Smart switching throughout into checks, and able to chip down the enemy team over time. Key to the kind of long-term success that the Noctowl saw was the rocks from Mudsdale and a layer of spikes from Pincurchin. This additional chip applied consistent damage to the enemy team and, stacked up over time as everyone was switching in and out. At the start of the game, did a great job dealing with the Trick Room Dottler, big Trick Room threat there. The Decidueye was able to keep pressure on, preventing a Trick Room abuser like perhaps Rhyperior from switching in for free and abusing the Trick Room turns, and was able to overall deal with that threat just fine. But the star of the show at the end of the game was, of course, Thievul here. Coming in electric terrain, popping the electric seed for a defense boost, getting the unburdened speed boost, and then following that up with a nasty plot boost, turning itself into quite a sweeper. At +1 defense, able to easily take a Talonflame attack, and then claiming 4 KOs in a row with the fantastic Dark Stab, and then, of course, pairing that with Grass Knot for Poliwrath as a Dark Resist. Fantastic choice here. Did a lot of work cleaning up at the end. And was set up well with all the pivoting early on. Very, very clean game, pretty straightforward, and it's what we've come to expect from the Noctowls. You have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, Thievul ending now 5-0 in the regular season for a 20-point mon, just spitting in the face of my Marowak's dream. I also really appreciate the special Decidueye. We've seen a lot of physical, some Swords Dance, some Choice Band from it. It was cool to see the grass and ghost coverage that he has on the special side, putting in quite a bit of work. Shadow Ball able, of course, to bypass the normally high physical defense of that Dottler that was setting up with the iron defenses. So very nice to see a little bit of extra ability there to modify his team just a little bit, show just how versatile and threatening it is. So now we're going to move on to the number 2 team, and that was, of course, the Wobbuffets, who got a 3-0 victory, one of the closer victories of the week here. But the Wobbuffets is still fended off the Agrons, who were trying to encroach on our top 4 territory this week, so that was very important. Stevie brought a team of Chandelure, Escavalier, Piloswine, Virizion, Archeops, and the Dracloak, which I have to say, Steve, overall, it looked like you were very in control of the game, basically all throughout. This was only a 3-0, but you definitely seem to have a handle on things quite well. Dracloak really putting in quite a bit of work. I'd like to give a nice shout out to that Cursed Body proc on U-turn. You love to see that, but Dracloak really showed off its amazing typing against Joey, resisting the bug moves, resisting everything that Excelgor could bring at you, resisting fire moves from Moltres, and surprisingly, it was able to swap in multiple times on a close combat, on a rapid spin. Dracloak putting in quite a bit of work there. I also love to see the Specs Chandelure doing 88% to a Moltres, of course known to be especially bulky, but wow, does that not matter when Chandelure is that strong. We'll of course be talking about that at the end of the game too. I'd like to mention the Dracloak later swapping in on a close combat, as well as being able to just U-turn right out, and whenever Joey brings in one or two appropriate threats. Very impressive showing from the Dracloak. Another mod that really showed off its prowess in the matchup, the Escavalier. Moltres obviously came for the fire typing, but look how many answers Steve ended up having for that. Escavalier able to come in on multiple different mons, some of the biggest threats. I'm talking especially that Thwacky that Joey favors. I'm talking about if Slurpuff was lacking coverage, able to tank things like a CC from Hitmontop later. Very strong in that matchup as well. Whenever we saw the first KOs of the game coming around, we saw Virizion taking a Sludge Bomb very well, the natural special bolt coming in handy there and KOing right back onto the Excelgor. But Void, more importantly, was Slurpuff coming in to try and get the sweep going with a Calm Mind Grassy Seed set. This one didn't quite work out as well as the Noctowls, especially whenever we saw the crit Leaf Blade from the Virizion into going down the Virizion due to recoil from Life Orb into the Piloswine being able to revenge KO the Slurpuff away. That was starting to boost up. That was definitely a big deal, big crit, but also, remember, boosted a little bit by the grassy terrain, high critical hit chance as well. Let's be honest, Joey was asking to get crit just a little bit there. Maybe not the best time to set up, but I don't know what other choice he had. I would have loved to see the Calm Mindset put in a little bit of work, but great job stopping that in its tracks. Big shout out to Archeops being able to roost up a couple times, showing a valuable piece for Steve and his versatility. One of his few defoggers as well, so important to establish the Archeops being able to come in and out effectively. We also saw Hitmontop trying to get that valuable Eviolite from Dracloak, but Dracloak able to stay in and burn that as well, blocking a Rapid Spin from another Mon as well, as Cavalier can tank that up. We saw Sandslash come in a little bit later. Questionable Earthquake while in grassy terrain. Of course, you have to be careful about that. We all know what terrains do. Of course we do. Rapid Spinning on the Dracloak switch in. Honestly, Steve was able to out-trade so easily that by the end, you're more than happy to just trade 1-for-1s down to the end of the game in order to stop the potential Sandslash sweep from happening a second week in a row and allowing Chandelure to pick up the final 2 KOs with those specs, and netting, I believe, the 12th KO for Chandelure to put that in the KO leader position as well. So very impressive top to bottom. It looks like it was a little closer than it was, but honestly a 3-0 just because you were trying to secure the victory no matter what against Joey. So well done to you. What else do you have to say about this battle?
I mean, yeah, I felt in control most of it. During the battle, I think someone who I wasn't expecting to have the role they had was Archeops. When it came down to it, the Moltres, of course, provides a lot of pressure between its 2 stabs. You know, I don't have clear switch-ins. You know, of course, I have Chandelure, easy switch-in on fire, as well as Dracloak, but they don't really like taking Hurricane all that much. Archeops, you know, providing a key defensive piece, able to come in on the Moltres every time, roost off the damage, and then keep on moving, so that I always had an answer and was never left in the, you know, left hanging out as the Moltres was applying pressure. So it was nice to see Archeops in that defensive role, which is quite a change of pace for it.
Absolutely. I think people sleep on its giant move pool. I know we saw that in our matchup where it got to use its special move pool. A little bit of support and defensive role too is very neat to see from something with an ability like it does. So we're going to move on to the number 3 team, and that is, in fact, the Bouffalant. Steve, tell the folks about the Bouffalant's 5-0 victory over the Psyducks.
Well, yeah, in case you forgot, or for those listening at home, the Bouffalant brought a team of Aerodactyl, Tentacruel, Steelix, Mesprit, Passimian, and Rotom Frost. In the early game, something I found quite amusing at least, was that the Bouffalant were able to get a slow U-turn off of the Passimian while it was in fact scarfed. You know, typically when you run Scarf U-turn, you're going first and switching in a defensive answer, but was able to get that, you know, all-important slow pivot while scarfed. Of course, also confirming the scarf on Bolton, which is probably the more important matter of the two. Early game, Mesprit was able to apply huge pressure with a couple coverage moves, Thunderbolt threading out the Mantine, but picking up big damage on the Golisopod, and then Dazzling Gleam able to pick up huge damage on the Scrafty. Tons of pressure being applied by Mesprit just with its vast move pool and, you know, its ability to threaten so many different mons. All in all, though, throughout, just lots of pivoting to correct answers. I mentioned it last time. I'll mention it again. Able to set up rocks first, which is picking up, you know, that all important chip around. Although it was eventually removed by a Mantine defog. However, that did proc something we have yet to see. I believe the Passimian Defiant picking up that big attack boost. Although it was quite at low health at this point in the game, and, you know, wasn't able to do too much with it, but was able to pick up one more KO before going down itself. But from that point on, it was just a matter of keeping the pressure on and picking up KOs. At that point, the Psyducks were down 2 Mons, and it was, you know, pivoting to the right answer, you know, hitting Mantine with electric moves, hitting Golisopod, electric moves, switching into Crunch, you know, 8 times or so. once realizing the Bolton was staying on that, Steelix, being a great answer, able to KO it back eventually with Earthquake. But all in all, just very clean battle, 5-0 victory. Solidifying your place up here in the top 4. Have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, this was probably one of my cleaner games in weeks. Very proud to be able to identify the usefulness of the Scarfs in battle. Seeing that with the Scarf Bolton, the Scarfs weren't actually doing much on Passimian or on Rotom. Definitely cool with letting Passimian get that knocked off. Passimian actually taking 3 hits in that battle before going down without any recovery, which was really cool. And then also definitely proud of the Rotom play, tricking the Scarf onto the Rest Scrafty. Probably the best way to prevent setup from something like Bulk Up once I saw it was a full special defense Shedskin set, was to just try and lock it in. And of course that had to go down later to the Passimian as well. Scarf Bolton kept Aerodactyl out, so that thing did not get to come in yet again, but I appreciate the pressure and prep that it forces from opponents for sure. Aerodactyl not coming out, but forcing Bolton to be Scarfed, which really helped kind of solidify the gameplay within the match. A lot of spread out KOs as well. Appreciated seeing Passimian and Mesprit getting a little bit more love than I've been giving them recently. So just an overall team win. It was excellent to be able to use a kind of a well-balanced team this time around. That's going to bring us to the number 4 coach on our top 4, and that is the Route 1 Burbs. We brought a team of Amara, Vaporeon, Shuckle, Alolan Sandslash, the Lycanroc, and the Alchemy to be able to get the 5-0 victory over the Cleveland Castforms. This was a little bit of an Alchemy show, I have to say. Really nice coverage from it. To see the Giga Drain being able to hit Castro super hard early, able to hit the Deancey super effectively as well. It was very nice to see. Got a little bit of stalling with the Gastro recovering early, and the Vaporeon wishing up, plus Deancey and Vaporeon both being able to use Heal Bell. So we saw a little bit of a stalemate to start things off at the beginning of the match. Before then, we had a bit of a questionable decision to leave Deancey in against the Steel-type Alolan Sandslash, so the first KO went that direction. But the back-to-back KO quest did not work out. Ice Cold Crash did a whole 97% to Cursula, but it was just jealous of all that physical bulk, and Burning Jealousy able to take that back down too. Really liked the response. Amara coming in, we saw the 3% on Cursula. What better way to take that out than with just a little bit of Hail Chip, netting Amara a KO, surviving the Specs Burning Jealousy, and setting up Stealth Rocks for the Burbs as well, which was awesome. Then able to skillfully dodge the incoming Focus Blast 2 to set up screens, which was very impressive. We were able to see Alchemy come back in, recover up, and then Mystical Fire the Vikavolt down as well. So we've seen Giga Drain, we've seen Mystical Fire, and look at what that coverage really does against this team. We're going to finish that off with Dazzling Gleam at the end of the game, and he needed to do that as well because the Mr. Mime, the only way that he could try to bring down the Alchemy was trying to trick something onto it so it couldn't move around with all that coverage, tricking a Scarf onto it, but Mime had to go down in the process as well. Alchemy just too strong. And by that point, too, is 5v2. The Burbs were already in such a dominant position, even if with the Alchemy a little bit neutered, and even then it was obviously pretty healthy as well. The Vaporeon Gastrodon Stallfest was very real as well, until Gastrodon finally had to switch due to Toxic. Flapple can't be using the Dragon move too much, or else Alchemy comes in for free, so a pair of Dazzling Gleams was able to finish things off for the Burbs. Couple of months really didn't need to use all that much. We saw Shuckle come in, lay a Toxic, and bait out the Outrage, but that didn't really end up mattering too much. Saw Lycanroc not even appear. We saw Amara with a crucial role in the mid-game, but really it was those other mods able to pivot around with the Vaporeon, able to tear things down with the Alchemy, a little bit of help and support from the Hail Core, which didn't even get to see the field together at the same time. Just a clean match, 5-0 once again from the Route 1 Burbs, proving that they probably do belong up here as well. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, you briefly mentioned on the Hail Core, excited to see Amara set the Hail on Sandslash, sweep with it, except by the time Amara made its way out, Sandslash had already fainted. Unfortunate there, but, definitely something to look forward to in the playoffs, as well as, all these water immune Pokemon that keep facing off. This was one of the more tame battles we saw. They just poisoned each other and wait for the other to die. Typically, we see them, try and heal the other up in the late game to prolong the battle. So it was good that, we've kind of moved away from that torture aspect of our gameplay.
Absolutely. We're becoming more and more humane here with the Wooper Club League as time goes on. So while that does cover it for the top 4, we do want to briefly mention a couple of teams to watch. Yes, we only have 1 week left, but these are the teams that we feel have a bit of a shot to actually make it into the top 4 teams. That'd be the Seattle Steamrollers and the Close Combat Club. It would take a little bit for either of them to make it into the top 4, but we do think there is a little bit of a chance. We saw the Steamrollers with a nice performance just this past week, able to take down another decent team here. We're starting to see Chad's team maybe come together again. We know that he made a ton of moves in the midseason here, trying to establish a bit more of a hail core, even than we see with the Burbs with the Obama Snow pickup. What are you seeing from the Steamrollers? What do you think they may need to do in order to try and sneak into that top 4?
I mean, a big thing for the Steamrollers would be getting a win against a top team. They've kind of been following a win-loss pattern where when they play, one of the teams seated in the bottom half, they win, but when they face a top-seeded team, they lose, and going back and forth. So kind of breaking that trend this week and picking up a win against you and the Buffalo Bouffalant would do wonders for them, for their chances of making it into the top 4, both in the actual top 4 and in power rankings.
Absolutely, and kind of on the other side, we see the Close Combat Club also starting to stick around a little bit too. He has at least one nice win against top team, and he could potentially get another one. We're maybe a little bit concerned about his struggles with a couple teams below them. What do you think about the Close Combat Club?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, his success against other top teams. Again, coming against you with his Week 2 win. He also has a close game with the Route 1 Burbs. So, has success as well as facing me this week. So a chance there for another win or perhaps close loss. But then again, he has also dropped games, dropping 6-0 to the Akron Agrons, dropping 5-0 to the Summit County Psyducks. Both teams, no longer on our to-watch list. So, has kind of a checkered past. Certainly a big win this week against the Wobbuffets could push him into the top 4. We'll talk about it a little bit later. He has, still has a chance to make it into the actual top 4 as well.
All right, quick apology there. We've got some technical difficulties on my end, so I'm going to try and finish things up myself. We just finished talking about some of the teams that we need to watch from this past week, but we do need to talk about some clinching scenarios and what happens with the playoffs that are coming up in just one more week. That's, of course, going to start with the Newport Noctowls, 7-0 plus 23, our last undefeated team of those 3 regular seasons we've had in the Wooper Club League. We've had 2 undefeated seasons. We'll see if the Noctowls can make it a 3rd here after losing only 1 last season and now undefeated here this time. We had some big wins against some lower teams, some decent wins against lower teams, and some small wins against top teams, all of which seem super calculated and in control from a very impressive Noctowl season, which of course means they deserve the number 1 seed easily in both power rankings and the regular standings. It's been impressive to watch the Decidui, Mudsdale, Electric Terrain Corps put in so much work. So definitely look forward to seeing him continue dominance in the playoffs, see if he can cement his legacy as one of the better players in the league, one of the best players in the league, and I might even be in trouble myself losing my number 1 overall title, because it's been a little bit since I've had the success that the Noctowls are having currently. Speaking of some success, we got the number 2 seed right now, the Waterdeep Wobbuffets. We don't need to go over 1 seed anymore because that's clinched. The top 4 seeds all get buys, so that's what we're looking to see for clinching. And the Wobbuffets at 5-2 plus 19 are just in range to have a number 2 through 4 seed secured. No matter what happens this week, they will have a top 4 seed and get a bye in the first round of the playoffs, which could be a big deal for them. The Wobbuffets could potentially take a week off here and prepare themselves for what is to come. They have a clear revenge path going too, as the 2 teams they lost to are currently the 1 and 3 teams, so very successful season overall, especially in being able to beat up some of the low teams and keep it close and competitive with the top teams. Would love to see what kinds of adjustments Steve ends up making in the latter half of the season here and going into the playoffs. It's all revolved around the Chandelure. We kind of saw that with the team building process, especially around that core with the Chandelure, Vericion, and Sharpedo. Been a lot of fun to watch Steve go at it. As I said, number 3 team, the Bouffalant, the other team to beat Steve aside from the Noctowls, and with only 1 point of differential, fewer 5-2 plus 18 rather than Steve's plus 19, and that is actually enough to potentially get knocked out of the number 2 through 4 seed. We do have this clinched, but all we need to do is not get 6-0'd by the Seattle Steamrollers, who do have a little bit to play for potentially. So as long as maybe the Bouffalant can get 1 KO, it's a guarantee for the top 4 seeds. That's pretty simple, pretty quick and easy. Hopefully it can happen. Of course, I'm a little bit biased, so I'm saying that as the Bouffalant's coach. with Bouffalant, it's been really a lot of fun to play with this team. It seems to be a little more offensive oriented, a lot of pressure game for sure coming out here. Fun to be able to see what kind of pressure the Aerodactyl puts in, even without coming on the field. We've talked with Steve a good bit about how Aerodactyl and Sharpedo have been similar in that aspect. They haven't put in quite the flashy numbers work that you would have expected to see from ones of those calibers, but just the prep that they force means their presence are still felt even without entering the battlefield, and that is a big deal. Been awesome to use the Passimian and Mesprit in the mid-tiers. The Guzzlord and Clawitzer are a little lower down, putting in a lot of work, and that's really, I think, the defining feature of these top three teams. The top tiers do force so much prep that the mid-tiers are able to pick up the slack and put in that amount of work, and it's been awesome to watch the top three teams work and operate. It'll be cool to see how many times you get to match up against each other in the playoffs as well. The other team that gets a bye, as of this moment, it's the Route 1 Burbs. They are also 5-2, but we see that differential dropping quite a bit there, only +8. They've had a lot more close matches in their wins than the other coaches up top, and that actually puts them in a much more threatening position to have their last seed there taken. At 5-2 +8, again, they are a full win over the remaining coaches below, so very simply, if they get a win versus the Noctowls, they're in. However, it is the Noctowls who are playing for pride and that undefeated season, of which we've only had 2. So perhaps that will not come quite as easily as you may expect. However, being up at 5-2 and having a differential advantage over everyone at 4-3, they can still definitely clinch even with a loss, because if the Steamrollers end up losing, or they have a differential not be able to made up, or the Psyducks do not also lose and do not have the differential made up, and the club also loses, they also do not have the differential made up, then the Route 1 Burbs can still make it in. It sounds like a lot, but really there are only a couple teams that are particularly close. It would take quite a big blowout loss from the Burbs and a couple of big wins for some of those lower teams to make up that room. The Burbs have had a successful season by all means, and it looks like they're going to end up as the 4 seed, potentially the 5 seed, and could actually pass a couple teams up, depending on if Steve and I blow it in the final week as well. Burbs, rather than focusing around 1 or 2 top picks, have definitely had a different play style, focusing on 1 or 2 different strategies, focusing around, say, Shuckle, being able to get something up, or being able to set up Sandstorm, or Hail, or Sun, for various different things to go right. It's awesome to watch him team build. It's very fun to see what he comes up with week to week, and we could get a chance to see that, not in the first week of the playoffs, but second, because he has a great chance at clinching a top 4 seed. As for the competitors who are looking for that number 4 seed, or perhaps even higher in the case of the Steamrollers, 4-3 +7. Where did this come from? It feels like we haven't talked about the Steamrollers enough on these videos, on the power rankings. It seems like this kind of came out of nowhere. We know that Chad was struggling a little bit in the early season, that it's taken a little bit of time to get kind of back on track with the team that he's got, but he's had some close wins, but more importantly, maybe even some close losses to get his differential to where it is. The ways he can get a bye this week. Well, 6-0 win versus the Bouffalant will do it. That will take my spot just outright if he can pull that off. Otherwise, he does still need a win against the Bouffalant, and he would also need the Burbs to drop the loss and make up the differential points there as well. There is only 1 differential point, so it's all but guaranteed that if he wins and the Burbs lose, that he's able to take that spot, but not entirely guaranteed, so we do need to mention it. And because he is so far ahead of the other 4-3 teams, if he wins, he automatically is ahead of them, so no need to worry about those teams. See if Chad can maybe pull off a miracle here and slip into a bye. Otherwise, maybe the path gets a little bit rockier or rougher, the potential for an upset here over Chad. The other couple teams to talk about, the Close Combat Club, finishing at 4-3 +0 with one more match to go against the Wobbuffets. That is a little bit of a tougher match, but again, Steve's got a 2-4 seed locked and guaranteed. There's no telling how seriously he'll take the match, especially if he thinks the Close Combat Club may have a chance to make it in. If suddenly it doesn't look like that will happen, then maybe they end up going with a little bit of memery. But with a win versus the Wobbuffets, this Close Combat Club also needs the Burbs to lose and to make up those 8 points of differential. They'd also need the Steamrollers to lose or to make up the differential, which they cannot do, so just a Steamrollers loss is what is needed there. And the Psyducks would need to lose, or they can just make sure that they overcome the differential there too. It's not easy for this Close Combat Club, but we do mention it because it is actually possible, and the same thing goes for the Summit County Psyducks, 4-3 -2, the darlings of the power rankings from just a couple weeks ago when they were 4-0. Look how the mighty have fallen. That's what -17 differential in the last 3 weeks will do to you. There is still a chance to turn around, and that could actually come with a miracle scenario here. Imagine the boost that would give to the morale of the Psyducks. To have the easiest opponent on this list, the Miltanks are at the bottom of the league. though they also would need the Burbs to lose and to make up all that differential. That is 10 differential points in total. They would also need the Steamrollers to lose, and they would need the Close Combat Club to either lose or make up those 2 points of differential over them as well. It's not easy for those last couple teams. We do include them because it's technically possible, and we would love to see some interesting scenarios happen in the final week. Speaking of which, we do have to go over the Week 8 matches real quick here, too. We've talked about most of these. The Bouffalant Steamrollers 6-0 potential, and if they do, then they claim the Bouffalant spot. Otherwise, they're going to need some help from the Noctowls to beat the Burbs, and of what could be a very important matchup for them, or potentially not all that important at all. Depends how seriously they want to end up taking it. Could be a big statement win for the Burbs. It could be a season-defining moment for the Noctowls, where they claim their 8th win to finish undefeated. The Wobbuffets and the Close Combat Club, again, depends how other games play out. If the Burbs have won or they didn't lose by quite enough, potentially the Close Combat Club wants to not take it quite as seriously. So, and the Wobbuffets can have a little bit of an off week here to start off the playoff run. Similarly, the Psyducks and the Miltanks down at the bottom. Perhaps this just becomes a get-right game for the Psyducks, but that could be crucial and important for them too. Finally, we do have to talk a little bit about the cat forms, Agrons, and the Orcorios and Incineroar. Yes, these teams are not playing for a top 4 seed, but those seedings within are crucial, especially considering we have reseeding. You do want to get as high a seed as possible. Imagine, for example, the Orcorios and Incineroar. If one of those teams gets a little bit hot, maybe the Cast Forms Agron's winner wants to make sure that they do not play one of those teams in that first round. And those seedings at the lower end, it could be crucial. Imagine what it does for your morale, too, if you just win that first playoff game. Imagine what's going to happen after that. Anything can happen once you reach the playoffs, and these teams could be primed to make something happen if they can get a little bit of a spark going from a Week 8 win, as well as helping out their adjusted seeding status. So that'll do it for me here. Thanks to Steve for working through some of the technical difficulties with me and recording the first half as well. Next time you see us, we're going to be talking about Week 8 and then the playoffs, in which we don't have to talk about the top 4 parts of the power rankings. We can actually talk about a lot of the other coaches and a lot of the other interesting matchups that we're going to see as the playoffs get underway. Regular season is almost finished, so join us then.